Hey guys, tonight we tiptoe, yes, very literally, into one of the least urgent but strangely delightful corners of history, how ancient Egyptians organized their sock drawers. I know! You're already wondering if you're too awake for this one, but trust me, if the idea of dusty linen foot gloves nestled beside reed-woven sandals doesn't lull you to sleep, nothing will. Picture this, golden sand stretching endlessly, the Nile murmuring softly through papyrus reeds, the warm sun baking mud brick homes into toasty silence. And inside one of those homes? A basket in the corner. Inside the basket? A pair of socks. Yes, socks. Not a metaphor. Literal socks. With little separated toes and everything. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake enough, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from, preferably while also wearing socks. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in the late Middle Kingdom, give or take a few pyramids. The air is dry, the floor is cool clay, and you shuffle across it in split-toe socks dyed a faded red ochre. Not because you're making a fashion statement. Not because you're cold. But because sand is everywhere. It gets in your toes, it scratches, and frankly, it's annoying. Contrary to popular belief, the Egyptians didn't spend every waking moment building pyramids or painting hieroglyphs about cats. They also had chores. And mornings. And socks. Yes, real archaeological socks. In fact, the oldest surviving pair we've found, currently living out its afterlife in the British Museum, was made sometime between 300 and 500 CE, using a technique called nail binding. It's not quite knitting. Not quite sewing. It's a kind of looping method that creates a tough, stretchy fabric ideal for feet. And those socks? Bright red, split-toed, designed specifically to go with sandals. Historians still argue whether these socks were everyday or something more ceremonial. Were they for temple rituals? Cold desert nights? Just an early flex in ancient foot fashion? We're not entirely sure. But one thing's clear, they were rare. They were useful, durable, and paired with the most iconic footwear in Egyptian history, the open-toe sandal. Which, if you're wondering, is a surprisingly sensible choice when paired with socks. Think of it as early proto-casual wear. The athleisure of ancient Memphis. You, in your imaginary linen kilt, rummage through your corner basket. It's not fancy, just woven reeds, maybe sealed with clay at the corners, and lined with bits of soft papyrus to keep the critters out. Inside, a couple neatly folded tunics, a scarf for windy days, a few scraps of dyed linen, and your prized possessions, 2 pairs of socks. They aren't identical. One is a bit patchy, repaired from heel to arch with contrasting thread. The other is newer, softer, probably gifted from a wealthier cousin or acquired through temple surplus. Quirky tidbit? We have written records of Egyptians donating their clothes, including footwear, to temples and for burial. Which might mean you're wearing someone else's socks. But hey, recycling's timeless. You slip them on. Not too tight. They're thick around the toes, thin at the arch, and you feel that gentle buffer between your soles and the sand. Like stepping into ancient foot clouds. Functional luxury. The streets outside stir. Potters are already spinning clay on kick wheels. The baker's boy trots by with flatbread in a reed basket, yelling something about fresh loaves. You pull on your sandals, go leather thongs with a woven papyrus sole, and step out into the morning warmth. You try not to think about how much those sandals cost. A few deben, maybe, depending on whether they were pre-owned or commissioned. Footwear wasn't cheap, but socks, they were crafted. Usually at home. Usually by someone patient. And patience, in this world, is more precious than gold. You pass a merchant selling dyed linen, blue from indigo, red from madder root. He doesn't glance at your socks. Not because they're unfashionable, but because they're unremarkably normal. Everyone wears something on their feet. Even the workers down by the river. Even priests in their pristine white robes. Even scribes muttering about grain tallies. Feet, after all, are sacred. And sand? Ubiquitous. The sun climbs. You're already regretting your decision not to wear the older pair. These are warm. Toasty. But you committed. And now the sweat begins. You pass a priest cleaning the steps of a temple. His feet are bare, washed moments ago in natron and cold water. A sign of humility and purification. He glares at your socks. You nod in acknowledgement. Sacred feet, sacred floors. You keep walking. Fringe detail? Ancient Egyptian foot care was no joke. They had pumice stones, foot oils, even priests assigned to the task of cleaning sacred walkways so no unworthy souls sullied the gods' paths. Literally. You pause by the riverbank. Adjust your sock straps. They've slipped slightly. The split-toe design works well, but only if you remember to retie them every few hours. A bit of water splashes your ankle. Refreshing. Slightly alarming. You realize, with some horror, that you may now have damp sock. Your day just got 20% worse. But don't worry, you'll dry off. The desert air is forgiving. The socks? Resilient. You walk on. Past scribes, guards, farmers, weavers. All in motion. All with their own routines. All wearing some variation of protective cloth on their feet. Some bound in leather. Some in wool. Some, like yours, in linen, meticulously repaired with stubborn thread. As the city hums and the Nile sparkles, you feel it, a quiet pride. Not in the grandeur of pyramids or the gold of tombs, but in the simple resilience of a society that said, yes, we live in sand, but our toes shall be cozy. And perhaps, just perhaps, that's the most relatable thing of all. The socks, of course, are only the beginning. Once your feet are warm and your sandals are secure, you can finally start your day without the indignity of grainy discomfort between your toes. But here's the thing, you didn't just wake up and find those socks stitched and waiting like some ancient version of Amazon delivery. No. Someone, maybe you, maybe your long-suffering aunt with nimble fingers and limited patience, had to make them. And that's where the world of wool, weaving, and weird toes begins. You sit on a woven mat outside your modest, sun-drenched home. The loom creaks softly in the background, half-warped and slightly tilted. The family goat bleats somewhere off to the side, probably because she's just remembered she once had freedom. You're holding a bundle of fibers, possibly sheep's wool, maybe flax, or even a mix of palm fibers depending on what's available, and trying to separate it into something that vaguely resembles thread. Mainstream historical fact? Ancient Egyptians were textile pioneers. As early as 5000 BCE, they were spinning flax into linen with dropped spindles and weaving it on horizontal looms. Linen was the standard, but wool? That was more complicated. Some considered wool impure for religious rituals, especially among priests. Others simply preferred it for colder nights, especially in the north where the desert chill hit hardest. So the socks, if woolen, were likely kept for specific uses or worn by folks who weren't planning to enter temples anytime soon. And if linen? Delicate, breathable, almost translucent in the right light. Not unlike those weird ankle socks people wear today that always vanish in the laundry. Now here comes the weird part. Ancient Egyptian socks didn't look like modern socks. No ribbing, no elastic, and no cute embroidered cats, although let's be honest, they would have loved that. Instead, many were designed with a split-toe structure. One pocket for the big toe, another for the rest. Why? To accommodate sandals, of course. It's the kind of innovation that only happens when you're deeply committed to wearing open-toed shoes year-round. And when the alternative is a barefoot walk across scorching stone courtyards that cook like frying pans by mid-morning, that commitment makes sense. You thread the fibers through your fingers, trying to keep a consistent tension. The sun shifts slightly overhead. You feel its weight press down like a warm hand. You've made 2 rows of loops now, careful, even, slightly uneven, and the shape is starting to form. Sort of. Quirky tidbit? Scholars believe some socks were made using a looping technique called nail binding, popular in various ancient cultures, including the Norse. It's different from knitting, which uses 2 needles. Nail binding uses one and creates a dense, interlocking weave that holds up better to wear and tear. Especially important when you're walking miles a day and socks are your only line of defense against sandblasted blisters. Of course, not everyone in your household is interested in this delicate craft. The younger sibling nearby is bored, dramatically pretending to die from heatstroke despite sitting in the shade and sipping sweet date water. He kicks off his sandals. One sock goes flying. You flinch. The goat eats it. Typical Tuesday. You sigh, pick up your needle, and continue the slow, meditative work of stitching another toe pocket. It's a process that requires little thinking, just muscle memory and rhythm. And in ancient Egypt, rhythm is everything. From the shadaf lifts of farmers to the tapping of scribes on papyrus, life here moves in loops and patterns. Historians still argue whether sock making was primarily a domestic activity or something practiced by professionals, perhaps tied to temples or wealthier estates. There's some evidence that professional weavers existed, especially in urban centers. But the bulk of sock making? Probably done at home. Quietly. Repetitively. Usually by women. Often while also scolding the family goat. Your fingers ache. Not badly, but with that familiar kind of ache that says you've been productive. You hold the piece up to the light and see your work clearly now, tight, neat, a little lopsided, but functional. Another sock nearly born. You reach for the dye pot. It smells a bit like wet clay and boiled spinach, but that's normal. You're working with madder root, deep red and earthy. A classic choice. Sometimes you experiment with woad for blue or grind copper-rich stones for green. But madder is safe. Reliable. Also, it doesn't stain your fingernails for 6 weeks. You dip the sock slowly, watching the fibers darken. The color will fade as it dries, but for now, it's vivid. Regal, almost. Definitely too fancy for your brother. This one's for you. You hang it on a line, stretched between 2 mud brick walls. The breeze catches it. It flutters. The goat eyes it with interest. You are the goat. Not today. The afternoon draws on. The loom gets quiet. The street begins to hush as heat gives way to a cooler dusk. You retrieve your finished sock, still a bit damp, but soft now. You pair it with its twin, finally a matching set, and fold them gently. Now comes the ultimate question. Where do you put them? There's no chest of drawers here. No IKEA cube organizer. No sock-themed novelty bins. Just a low wooden box, smoothed by years of use and lined with faded cloth. You open it. Inside, folded tunics, a braided belt, a coiled head wrap, and, carefully nested in the corner, your socks. You lay the new pair beside the old. Touch them once, briefly. Then close the lid. Another day done. And tomorrow? Another sock, another stitch, another slightly sunburned goat incident. All in a world where even the smallest act, like weaving something soft for your feet, is a thread in the great tapestry of history. You wake up early, long before Ra's golden boat sails across the horizon, because today is Laundry Day. And Laundry Day in ancient Egypt isn't just a quick toss into the washer situation. No, this is a full-body, multi-hour, bend and scrub production. And yes, it includes socks. Because as it turns out, even 3,000 years ago, people weren't exactly thrilled about stinky feet. Your socks, dusty from yesterday's errands and maybe faintly perfumed with goat breath, get tossed into a woven basket alongside a modest pile of linen wraps, tunics, and an inexplicably crunchy headcloth. You hoist the basket up, no easy feat when it's full of damp fabric and probably sand hiding in every fold, and head down toward the Nile. The banks are already buzzing with activity. Women with long paddles slapping linen against flat stones. Children running around pretending to be crocodiles. One guy who's clearly just here to gossip and definitely not helping. The river gurgles softly, smelling faintly of silt, lotus blossoms, and faint regrets. You kneel by the edge, splash water onto the first sock, an older pair, already threadbare at the heel. The Nile water is cold, shockingly so, and you stifle a yelp. Still, it's refreshing. You lather in a little natron, the ancient Egyptian go-to for cleaning basically everything. Natron is a naturally occurring mix of baking soda and salt, great for keeping your whites white and your sacred sandals free of stink. Mainstream historical fact? Natron wasn't just for laundry. It was also used for mummification, toothpaste, and even as an early deodorant. Talk about a multipurpose miracle. You scrub the socks vigorously against a flat stone, rounded smooth by generations of washing and time. The fibers twist under your fingers. A few loose threads pull free, but overall, they hold. Ancient craftsmanship is nothing if not sturdy. A woman beside you eyes the sock. Split toe, she asks casually. You nod. She lifts a brow, impressed. That's for sandal wearers, she says. Priestly stuff? You shake your head. Everyday use. She grins. Fancy. You blush a little. Your socks have status. Who knew? You rinse and wring them out. They flap wetly in your hands like two angry fish. Then they're laid carefully on a slanted reed mat to dry, angled to catch the morning sun. In a few hours, they'll be crisp, sun-dried, and, hopefully, not stolen by a passing ibis. Quirky tidbit? Archaeologists have found evidence that ancient Egyptians sometimes scented their clothing, including undergarments, with myrrh or lotus oil. So yes, it's entirely possible your freshly laundered socks would smell like a tiny perfumed garden. Not bad for something that's seen the inside of a sandal. You take a moment to wring out your own tunic and belt, then stretch backward, cracking your spine like an old wooden door. The Nile shimmers. A breeze rolls in, carrying the scent of wet reeds and warm stone. Laundry day isn't glamorous, but it's kind of meditative. The repetitive scrubbing. The splash of water. The chatter of neighbors discussing temple politics or whose goat ate whose laundry last week. Time passes like the river, slowly, steadily, with small ripples and the occasional fish jump. You glance over at your drying socks. They're half crisp already. The red-dyed pair has faded a bit, but the color still holds. The split toe seam is fraying slightly. You'll need to mend that tonight. Nothing dramatic. Just a few quick stitches. And yes, you do have a dedicated sock needle. It lives in your sewing pouch next to the bone buttons and the emergency sandal thong. You retrieve your drying items one by one, folding them into a neat stack atop a cloth-covered tray. Socks on top, partly to keep them from getting crushed, partly because you're oddly proud of them. Historians still argue whether ancient laundry days were communal rituals or solitary tasks. Some scholars suggest families had designated launderers, especially in elite households. Others think temple workers or servants handled it all. But for average folks, it was probably a shared affair, part social, part survival. Back home, you lay your clean items on a woven mat to finish airing. The socks get a little extra attention, tugged gently into shape, paired neatly heel to heel, then folded into a loose roll. No elastic bands here. No color-coded toe markers. Just thread, fabric, and a sense of order. And now comes the most sacred moment of all, sock storage. You lift the lid of your clothing chest, more of a low wooden crate, really. Inside are folded garments organized in a way that makes perfect sense to you and absolutely no one else. Tunics on the left. Head wraps in the center. Sashes folded and stacked like crepes. And socks? They go into a smaller, shallower box nestled inside. The mini chest, if you will. Reserved for small, important things, socks, belt ties, hair rings, and that weird bead you once found in a market and never figured out how to wear. You place the socks gently, like you're putting a baby chick to bed. And then you close the lid. Laundry day, complete. You stretch again. Your arms ache, your fingers are pruny, and your knees hate you, but your socks are clean. That counts for something. Outside, the streets hum with late morning noise. Merchants setting up shop. Donkeys braying. The scent of grilled onions drifting from someone's open fire pit. You breathe it in. Alive. Anchored. Slightly sweaty. And clean. You wonder, for a moment, how future people will treat their laundry. Will they fold with such care? Will they scent their socks with crushed lotus? Will they argue over whether one should store them rolled, flat, or twisted into some fancy origami pyramid? Probably not. But maybe, just maybe, someone will care enough to wonder. And that's what keeps history alive. Even in the sock drawer. So here's the thing, they didn't have drawers. Not really. Not in the sense that you and your IKEA-obsessed modern mind are picturing. No smooth lighting, cedar-scented compartments with little brass knobs labeled socks and mismatched regrets. In ancient Egypt, a sock drawer was more likely a humble storage basket, a wooden chest, or, in some truly rustic cases, a well-behaved corner of the floor. You slide open the wooden lid of your family's storage crate. It creaks slightly, the smell of dust and time puffing out in a little cloud. Inside, everything has its place, though not because of any grand interior design system. More because if it doesn't have its place, you'll spend half your life trying to remember where you tucked that one sock with the stitched scarab on the heel. You take a moment to refold a crumpled tunic, soft linen, creased from use. Underneath it, the mini box. Your sock sanctuary. Carefully wedged beside it are a few rolled belts, 2 narrow sashes, and what might be a dried-up lotus pod someone meant to throw out weeks ago. Classic. Mainstream historical fact. Most ancient Egyptian homes, especially among the working and middle classes, didn't have much in the way of furniture. Beds were rare. Tables were low and multi-purpose. Storage was creative. Think baskets woven from palm fronds, pots with lids, leather pouches, and, yes, simple wooden chests passed down for generations. You sit back on your heels, surveying your carefully folded linen empire. For you, this is more than tidiness. It's control in a sandy, chaotic world. And honestly, there's something deeply soothing about knowing exactly where your good socks are. Especially when you're rushing to meet the temple scribe in 20 minutes and can't show up with mismatched heels. Again, historians still argue whether the idea of organized personal belongings, like clothing stored by category, was a widespread practice or more of an upper-class phenomenon. But there's enough evidence from tomb paintings, temple texts, and preserved homes that strongly suggests, yes, even ancient people liked their stuff neat. Quirky tidbit? Some burials included miniature household items, like model chests, fake food, or tiny jars, which many believe symbolize what the deceased would need in the afterlife. And yes, that might mean someone was buried with a model sock drawer. Because nothing says eternal peace like linen anklewear on demand. You glance around your small home. The clay walls are cool in the morning shade. A breeze flutters the reed mat hanging in the doorway. It's quiet, just the soft clink of someone pounding grain outside and a distant goat grumbling about something existential. You pick up a fresh pair of socks from your mini box. They're folded flat, heel to toe, just the way your grandmother taught you. You slide them onto your feet, feeling the linen mold gently to your skin. A small patch at the arch reminds you of last week's incident with a broken pottery shard. The repair isn't pretty, but it's solid. Over in the corner, your sibling is rooting around in their storage chest. Less organized. More sock tornado. They mutter something about the good pair and hold up a misshapen clump of fabric that may have once been a sock or possibly a deflated rag doll. It's unclear. You don't judge. Much. Instead, you offer them one of your spare pairs, last year's model, a little faded, but still functional. They accept with a shrug and a faint grunt of thanks. Sharing socks? A time-honored tradition dating back millennia. You sit at the threshold now, letting the sun warm your legs as you mend a small hole in a heel. The needle slides through the linen with a soft pop. Over and over, stitch by stitch, you patch the tear. Not because anyone will see it, but because you'll know it's there. And that's enough. The sky grows brighter. Another day beginning. You think about the rituals that govern this place. The quiet ones. The daily rhythms no one carves into stone. Laundry days. Sock mending. Organizing your little chest so that everything has its sacred space. These aren't pharaonic declarations. They're the heartbeat of an ordinary life. And yet, there's something kind of beautiful in that. In knowing that 3,000 years later, people still worry about lost socks, still fight the chaos of clutter, still feel a strange and tender satisfaction when the drawer, real or metaphorical, is finally, perfectly organized. You return your mended sock to its place. Folded. Secure. Ready. Tomorrow might bring a festival. Or a sandstorm. Or a visit from that one merchant who smells like pickled onions and won't stop talking about his cat. But today, your socks are clean. Folded. Findable. And for a brief, linen-wrapped moment, everything feels right with the world. So here's where it starts to get unreasonably serious. Not about war or gods or pharaohs, no. About sock rotation. Because you, practical and forward-thinking citizen of ancient Egypt, aren't just tossing your socks into a box and forgetting about them. You are strategically managing your foot textiles like a person who's got places to be and sandals to impress. You reach into the mini chest, fingers skimming over folded linen like a papyrus reader decoding sacred scrolls. There's a system here, invisible to anyone else but crystal clear to you. The red-dyed pair with the small heel patch? That's for temple visits, formal, but not too flashy. The natural undyed pair with reinforced toe stitching? Your everyday workhorse sock. The slightly too long pair with one toe slightly off-center? Reserved exclusively for winter mornings when your feet are half numb and you don't care what's fashionable. Mainstream historical fact? The ancient Egyptians absolutely understood the concept of rotation, whether in their crops, their water channels, or yes, even their clothing. They maintained complex routines for personal hygiene, work garments, ceremonial dress, and seasonal attire. Some items were saved for festivals, others worn daily and replaced regularly. Socks, like tunics, were considered part of this careful rhythm. You pull out your go-to pair and check the seam. Still intact. You turn it inside out, habit. Nothing loose, nothing scratchy, no remnants of yesterday's river pebbles hiding like sock grenades. These are good to go. Outside, the sun is pushing higher now, blinding on the limestone walls. You slip into your sandals, socks firmly in place, and step out into the sandy path that winds between houses. The hem of your tunic flaps slightly. The socks cushion your steps. You don't think about them much once you're walking, but that's the point, isn't it? The best clothes are the ones that vanish into comfort. As you pass a neighbor's doorway, you catch sight of their own laundry drying on a line. A pair of socks, new, perhaps. Bright indigo, dyed with woad. Fancy. You try not to be jealous. Quirky tidbit? In some tombs, garments were found carefully folded and stored in chests, suggesting not just preservation but pride. One such tomb even had a complete linen inventory listed on papyrus, including pairs of foot coverings. Yes, someone was keeping ancient sock spreadsheets. There is, evidently, a long history of textile micromanagement. Back home at the end of the day, you remove your socks like a ritual. Slowly. Reverently. You shake out the dust, because let's face it, you'll always get sand in there somehow. You smooth out the fabric, then lay the pair over the edge of your chest to air out. You don't wash them every day. That would be overkill. But you do follow a schedule every third day, unless they've encountered something dramatic. Like a puddle. Or fermented fish paste. Or your sibling's sweaty post-race feet. Historians still argue whether the rotation of garments followed a strict ritual order or a more flexible, seasonal logic. Some believe certain days were designated for particular garments, much like specific offerings for certain gods. Others argue daily life was more fluid, with personal preference and climate playing bigger roles. Either way, the evidence is clear: the ancient Egyptian relationship to clothing was thoughtful, purposeful, and in many ways, incredibly modern. You roll up the socks and place them on the left side of your mini chest, the used but still wearable zone. To the right are the clean and ready pairs. And in the middle? One sad sock that's lost its mate. It's been there for weeks. You've searched the laundry baskets. You've checked under mats. You've even asked the neighbor's dog, nothing. You keep the sock anyway. Not for use, but out of respect. Because someday, maybe, the other will turn up. Or, failing that, you'll make a new mate to match. If not in color, then at least in spirit. A fraternal sockship. There's something comforting in this quiet domesticity, in the way you handle each item as though it matters. Because it does. In a world full of gods, droughts, and sandstorms, you find peace in a clean, sorted sock drawer. Later that evening, after dinner, lentils and a slightly burned flatbread, you sit in the doorway again. Your sibling is brushing a tunic with a reed comb. The goat is licking a rock. Stars blink overhead. And you're holding another sock in your lap, this one needing a bit of reinforcement at the arch. Your needle glints in the lantern light. You push it through, stitch after stitch, drawing the fabric together like a healer closing a wound. The sock doesn't complain. It just quietly accepts the repair, ready for another round tomorrow. When you finish, you roll it gently, tie it with a bit of string, and nestle it next to its mate. Then, perhaps a little smugly, you adjust the organization of your drawer. Again. Because yes, you could just toss everything in and call it a day. But that's not who you are. You're the kind of person who rotates your socks. And in a dusty world of impermanence, that's its own kind of power. You've heard of pyramid builders, tomb painters, and scribes, but have you ever spared a thought for the linen dyers? These are the unsung artisans who give your socks their pop of color, their subtle stripes, and that faint smell of crushed beetles on a humid day. They work in the shadows of the temples, figuratively and literally, because dyeing linen is messy, smelly, and sometimes vaguely toxic work. But oh, the payoff. Your sock drawer, or, again, your lovingly organized mini chest, isn't just full of pale neutrals. No, your collection includes faded reds, pale ochres, deep browns, and that one stubbornly mustard-colored pair that never quite goes with anything. And all of that begins in the dyer's vat. You pass by the dyer's stall late one morning on your way to the weaver's quarter. You catch a whiff before you even see it. A heady cocktail of fermented madder root, stale water, and something that might be goat urine, but who's counting? Mainstream historical fact? Ancient Egyptian dyers used a wide array of natural dyes, most commonly red, from madder, yellow, from saffron or weld, and blue, from indigo or woad. Linen, notoriously hard to dye due to its smooth fibers, required a lot of soaking, mordants, and magic, or maybe just patience and the occasional sheep dung additive. You peek over the rim of a giant clay vat. A soggy mess of linen soaks in what looks like oversteeped tea. A dyer, arms stained to the elbows, stirs it with a long stick and hums a tune about sandals and heartbreak. You nod respectfully. This is sock origin territory. Holy ground. Nearby, dyed cloths hang like flags, drying in the sun. A few are bold reds, likely destined for someone important. Others are pale and patchy, practice pieces, maybe. You wonder what your own socks looked like fresh out of the vat. Probably like undercooked tomatoes. You wander over to the seconds pile. Slightly miscolored, unevenly dyed, or, your favorite, experimental. You pick through it, hoping to find something for future sock making. And there it is, a scrap of linen, deep brown, with a hint of blue undertone. It smells terrible. It's perfect. Quirky tidbit? Some dyes were so valuable they were traded like currency. Blue, in particular, was linked to divinity and rebirth. Which means your blue-striped socks are technically holy foot garments. Congratulations. You trade a few lentil cakes for the scrap, then carry it home like treasure. The possibilities are endless: heel patches, new toe seams, maybe even an entirely new pair. If the smell wears off. Historians still argue whether linen dyes were applied to clothing regularly or reserved for elite use. While most surviving linens are natural in tone, there are enough dyed fragments to suggest everyday folks had some access to color. It probably depended on location, wealth, and how well you could haggle. At home, you lay the cloth out flat, smoothing it with a rounded stone. You measure it against your foot, cut a strip, and begin forming the toe cup. The needle slips in and out, making that satisfying soft pock sound against the fabric. The smell? Still questionable. You light a bit of incense just to be safe. When it's finished, you hold it up proudly. The new sock isn't perfect. One side is longer. The toe is pointier than necessary. But it's yours. It's handmade. And it is, unmistakably, brownish blue. You add it to the testing section of the mini chest, right next to the pair you made last month from leftover sash fabric. There's something oddly exhilarating about growing your sock drawer one piece at a time. No mass production. No duplicates. Just effort, creativity, and a mild amount of toe calluses. Later, as the sun sets and the sky goes pink over the reeds, you and your siblings sit outside, both mending in silence. They're working on a tunic hem. You're inspecting the interior stitching of your new sock, muttering softly about alignment and thread tension. "Is that brown?" your sibling finally asks. You nod. They sniff. Pause. "It smells like..." "Don't," you say gently. "It's an aromatic experience." They nod, not convinced, but polite enough to let it go. The stars begin to blink overhead. Somewhere, a cat yells at a clay pot. The Nile gurgles in the distance, unconcerned with dye batches or toe seams. You slip your new sock onto one foot, wiggle your toes inside the snug linen shell, and smile. It fits. Mostly. It'll stretch. Sock fashion, you think, is a deeply personal thing. And whether it's hand-dyed by artisans or stitched from leftover temple cloth, each pair tells a story. A little saga of patience, preference, and the occasional olfactory risk. Back inside, you place the worn pair into the ready-to-wash basket and update your mental rotation. One pair in, one pair pending. The balance remains. And now, to bed. You blow out the lantern. The room dims. Your feet are warm. Your socks are weird. And everything feels oddly right. Morning again, and you're already kneeling beside the mini chest, deciding which pair to wear based on what kind of day this will be. Not in a philosophical sense. In a very real, very dust on your ankles sense. Will there be climbing? Long errands? A ceremonial stroll to your cousin's awkward engagement ritual where everyone pretends not to judge your sandals? You reach for your lightest pair, the breathable, loosely woven ones with the slightly frayed cuff. Today is going to be a walking day. You can feel it in your knees. And also because your mother already yelled through the doorway that you're delivering 2 jars of date paste across the village. Mainstream historical fact? Ancient Egyptian life was highly mobile, especially for commoners. Whether you were gathering water, tending crops, herding animals, or just fetching papyrus bundles from the scribe's quarter, walking was a constant part of the routine. Footwear varied, but linen socks paired with sandals were not unheard of, especially for protection against heat and sand abrasion. You tug the socks over your heels and double knot your sandals, the way you were taught after that unfortunate loose-thong incident during last year's procession. The toe straps creak slightly. Your feet feel secure. Cozy, but not sweaty. And that's no small miracle considering the desert climate and the fact that one of your neighbors still insists leather is too elite for daily wear. As you start your walk through the village, socks hugging your feet like tiny linen confidants, you notice the patterns of daily movement around you. A potter dragging a wheel into the shade. A woman beating dust from rugs. A child attempting to ride a goat like a chariot. Standard fare. The ground beneath you changes texture every few steps, hardened mud, soft dust, jagged bits of gravel, the occasional surprise puddle left behind by someone's poorly tied water jar. It's a test. For your socks. For your patience. For your balance. Quirky tidbit? Some scholars suggest ancient Egyptian footwear may have been personalized with charms or spells, either stitched into the fabric or written in ink on the sole. Because if you're going to step in dung, you might as well do it with divine protection. It adds a certain flair. You pass the weaver's house and glance at the lines of drying thread. There's that reddish-brown hue again, the same as your one adventurous sock. You consider asking about it later. Maybe trade some barley cakes for a handful of dyed fiber. But not now. You've got places to be. The jars of date paste swing from your carrying pole. The walk isn't short, but it's rhythmic. Step after step. Your sandals flap. Your socks absorb. You find yourself humming the same work song the farmers use, mostly to keep your brain from drifting into what if I forgot to close the lid on the chest? Panic. Historians still argue whether commoners viewed socks as practical necessities or mild luxuries. Some tomb illustrations depict barefoot laborers, while others show elaborately dressed workers with foot coverings. The truth, like your one remaining unmatched sock, is probably somewhere in between. Midway through your walk, you rest beneath a fig tree. Not for the shade, which is questionable, but to give your feet a break. You slip off one sandal. Then the sock. You shake it gently. A few grains of sand fall out, like ancient exfoliant. The fabric is warm, dry, and somehow still smells slightly like incense from last week's temple visit. You put it back on carefully, like armor. Then the sandal. Double knot again. You're ready. When you finally arrive at your cousin's house, a slightly crooked clay structure with 3 goats loitering like bouncers, you deliver the date paste with the appropriate number of nods and overly long greetings. They invite you to stay. You pretend to hesitate. You stay. While the cousin's family chats about dowries and whose turn it is to repair the thatch roof, you find yourself gazing down at your own feet. Clean socks. Sturdy sandals. Dust smudged just around the edges. It's a weird source of pride. Later, after some flatbread, laughter, and an awkward song involving a tambourine made from a fish bladder, you begin your walk home. The sun is sinking. Shadows stretch long across the path. And your socks, somehow, still feel good. No rubbing. No dampness. Just quiet, competent foot coverage. When you return home, tired but content, you take off the sandals. Then the socks. You stretch your toes into the cool floor, the clay smooth beneath your soles. You fold the socks, not perfectly, because you're human, but neatly enough. They've earned a front row spot in the ready to wear again section of the drawer. You smile at them. A bit stupidly. But hey, they got you through another walking day. And in this ancient world, where floods rise and pharaohs fall and goats occasionally eat papyrus scrolls, there's something comforting about that. You wake to the smell of warm bread, the creak of a water jar being lifted, and a whispering breeze slipping through the reed mat over the door. It's laundry day, again. You know this not because anyone said so, but because your laundry pile is now 3 socks high. And that's a red flag in your otherwise highly curated fabric life. You stretch, rub your eyes, and slide open the mini chest. Your still wearable section has officially become a danger zone. One sock is stiff. Another has a suspicious mystery crumb. It's time. You gather the pile of foot soldiers, pairs and strays alike, and make your way to the communal washing area. It's just past the goat pen, near the slow bend in the canal where the water is clean enough to rinse things but not so fast that your socks vanish downstream forever. Like last month. We don't talk about last month. Mainstream historical fact? Ancient Egyptians were notably clean. Bathing, laundry, and hygiene rituals were daily concerns, even for commoners. Laundry was often a communal activity, typically performed in rivers, canals, or shallow pools using clay basins, abrasive sand, and a lot of vigorous wringing. You arrive and greet your fellow launderers with the appropriate level of sleepy grunts and nods. No one is chatty yet, it's too early. One woman is already knee-deep in suds, pounding tunics against a flat stone with the energy of someone avenging a personal slight. You squat near the edge, dip your first sock into the water, and begin the ancient art of agitation. Your fingers work through the linen, pressing, squeezing, and muttering curses at that one stubborn stain that you swear wasn't there yesterday. Maybe it's goat-related. Again. Quirky tidbit? Ancient laundry sometimes involved natural soaps made from ash and clay, or even sour milk and natron, a salty, alkaline substance also used in mummification. You feel strangely reassured that your sock is getting the same treatment as a royal corpse. Prestige, baby. Around you, other laundry warriors scrub away. Someone is arguing softly over a missing headcloth. A baby sneezes into a tunic. A teenager tries to rinse something without actually getting their hands wet. Classic. You rinse each sock carefully. One by one. Turn them inside out. Resoak. A quick sniff check, passable. You set each pair out on a woven reed mat to dry, smoothing the fabric like a tiny linen spa treatment. The sun is already warming them. They'll be dry by midday. Historians still argue whether ancient laundry practices were shared equally between genders, or if women primarily carried the burden. Evidence from tomb paintings and records suggests women were often in charge of household cleaning, but men also participated, especially when laundering work garments or temple linens. Basically, whoever noticed the grime first probably got the job. You sit back and watch your socks ripple gently in the breeze. There's something satisfying about it. Like witnessing the rebirth of your wardrobe. The colors look brighter wet, reds deeper, browns richer, even your poor mustard pear has a moment of golden glory. A neighbor walks by and nods at your spread. Nice fold, they say, dryly. You beam. Once everything is washed, you do the sacred transfer, gathering the socks from the drying mat and rolling them gently, one by one. Back home, they return to their rightful place in the chest. Clean. Organized. Ready for rotation. The drawer looks like a linen rainbow. You exhale. You reward yourself with a cup of beer, mild, grainy, vaguely sour, and absolutely earned. You sip it slowly while reclining on a woven mat, socks folded neatly beside you like little fabric trophies. Life is, for this brief moment, balanced. Later, your sibling shuffles in and tosses a crumpled sock at you. Laundry? They ask, trying to appear innocent. You stare at it. It's damp. It smells like onions and regret. There's a beetle crawling out of the toe seam. That, you say slowly, doesn't belong to this house anymore. You both burst out laughing. And even the sock seems to accept its fate as it's launched into the unsalvageable basket, destined for some future reincarnation as stuffing for a cushion or a toy for the neighbor's cat. Even in ancient Egypt, not every sock lives forever. You fall asleep that night with your clean socks carefully tucked in their drawer. You stretch your legs, feel the cool linen bedding, and know that tomorrow's foot journey will begin with fresh, fragrant comfort. It's a small thing, but it matters. Because when you live in a world of clay bricks, flooding Nile seasons, and overly dramatic cats, a clean sock drawer is as close to inner peace as it gets. You wake the next day with a slight tickle in your throat and a very unambiguous cough from your sibling. Perfect. Just as the winds shift and the air thickens with early summer dust, your body decides to try being dramatic. You pull on your softest pair of socks, the comfort ones. The kind that feel like they've heard your secrets and agreed not to tell anyone. Today, you're not doing much. You've declared it a house day, which in ancient Egypt means minimal errands, slightly more honey water, and ideally no goat-related injuries. You settle into a quiet morning by tidying your living space, which, if we're honest, is mostly rearranging already neat things into new, equally neat arrangements. First, the sock chest. Of course. You lift the lid and stare like a priest before a sacred rite. Some pairs are fresh from yesterday's sun-drying ritual. Others have been waiting patiently for their return to duty. You shift things gently, re-rolling a slightly loose pair, tucking a frayed edge, rotating the front pairs to the back. Mainstream historical fact? Linen was prone to wear and fray, and Egyptians developed advanced techniques to extend its lifespan. They rehemmed tunics, patched sheets, and yes, darned socks. Threads were often pulled from old cloth or even palm fibers. Mending wasn't a chore. It was a necessity, and sometimes even a creative outlet. You pick up one particularly ragged pair. The toes are thin. A heel's gone threadbare. It has clearly seen things. You carry it to the light, thread your needle, and begin your quiet ritual of saving it. Stitch by stitch. Loop by loop. Your fingers move automatically, and your mind drifts. Quirky tidbit? Some ancient Egyptians believed in the protective magic of repeated motions, like weaving, combing, or sewing. Each stitch was not just repair, but invocation. You aren't saying spells, but you are definitely muttering under your breath about how this sock has betrayed you more than once. Your sibling appears with a steaming bowl of something herbal and murky. You sick? They ask. Just pre-sick, you reply, which is definitely not a medical diagnosis but sounds more manageable. You sip the potion. It tastes like warm dirt and regrets. But your socks are looking better. Historians still argue whether minor illnesses were treated seriously among commoners or simply endured until they passed. Some records mention herbal poultices, sleep, and dietary changes, while others suggest many simply powered through with linen wrapped around whatever body part was failing them that week. By midday, you've repaired 3 pairs, rejected one, and accidentally sewn one sock to your tunic. Classic. You lay them all out on a fresh reed mat. Sunlight spills in through the slats of the roof, highlighting your work. Each sock looks slightly different now, some patched with mismatched colors, some shortened after losing their shape, and one that you think might now qualify as a mitten. You're not proud. You're not proud. Later, you pull out your oldest sock. It's soft like river silt, thinner than parchment, and lined with tiny, precise stitches, repairs upon repairs, like rings inside a tree. You've had this one since before last planting season. It survived floods, a dropped clay pot, and that time you stepped in hot coals by accident. It's a survivor. You hesitate. Maybe it's time. You take a deep breath and move it gently from the usable section of the drawer to the small cloth pouch labeled retired. Yes, you have a retirement home for socks. No, you don't need judgment right now. There's something comforting about honoring the passage of time through tiny, personal rituals. And a sock, simple, functional, often forgotten, becomes something more when you've walked the dry paths of the Nile Valley with it for over a year. It's not just cloth. It's memory. You spend the rest of the day wrapped in your freshly repaired pair, nibbling honey cakes and humming to yourself. Occasionally, you lift your foot just to admire the neatness of your stitching. You deserve an award. Maybe a bronze statue. Or a larger sock drawer. One day. Outside, the wind dies down. The afternoon settles into that golden quiet where even the goats pause to nap. You lean back, eyes fluttering, comforted by soft socks, mended linen, and the faint hope that your throat tickle is just the weather. As the sky darkens and the lanterns glow to life, you slide your socks off, fold them neatly, and nestle them back in the drawer. The frayed, the fixed, the still good, and the retired. Each one in its place. And just like that, your day of quiet domesticity ends with warm feet, organized thoughts, and one less hole in your life, literally and figuratively. You wake to the sound of someone loudly reciting grain tallies outside. A normal alarm, really. You roll over, stretch your feet, and instantly feel the frayed edge of an old sock brushing against your toes like it's trying to whisper, "Replace me, coward." You sigh. Today is market day, and that means two things. One, everyone in the village will be there, and two, someone's going to be judging your socks, whether they admit it or not. It's not a fashion show exactly, but in ancient Egypt, presentation matters. Even down to the ankles. You pull open the chest. This time, you go bold. A stripy pair, one of your earliest experiments with alternating dyed threads. The right one is slightly longer than the left, and the toe seam pulls a little, but they're showy. Confident. Loud, in a linen kind of way. Mainstream historical fact? While the concept of fashion in ancient Egypt was more tied to rank and ritual than trend cycles, personal expression did find its way into daily clothing through color, pattern, and especially accessories. And what's more personal than socks you stitched yourself while muttering about goat theft and thread tension? You walk the dusty road to market, socks snug, sandals freshly reknotted. The air smells like baked onions, reed baskets, and sun-warmed fish. Familiar. Comforting. Slightly nauseating if inhaled too deeply. As you enter the market square, your socks already attract attention. Mostly because they're loud for such a small item. Someone raises an eyebrow. Another person gives a subtle nod, the universal sign of those aren't bad, actually. You beam with quiet pride. Quirky tidbit? In larger cities like Thebes and Memphis, artisans sometimes added tiny, symbolic embroidery to garments, stars, ankhs, or even cats. There's no clear evidence they did this to socks, but then again, how many socks have survived for us to check? Exactly. You pass the textile stalls first. Piles of dyed thread, baskets of unspun flax, bolts of linen in every imaginable shade of beige. One vendor tries to sell you temple-grade thread. You examine it closely. It's thread. You buy a little anyway. It's hard to resist. Then you hit the second-hand clothing stretch. You dig through piles of tunics, head wraps, and yes, mysterious fabric scraps that might be the ghosts of former socks. You find a fragment with a decent heel curve and hold it up to the light. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian markets sold individual items like socks or only full garments and bolts of cloth. Some papyri suggest a thriving trade in used linens, but it's unclear how granular those sales got. You choose to believe someone once bartered 3 onions for a single sock. A familiar voice calls your name. It's that cousin who always critiques your stitching. Today, they're in a full yellow tunic, sandals gleaming, and absolutely no socks. You're still wearing those things? They smirk, eyeing your ankles like they just spotted a lizard with a bow tie. You smile sweetly. Yes. And my feet are clean, warm, and blessed by Ra himself. They roll their eyes but don't argue. Probably jealous. After several laps around the market, a quick detour for dry dates, and a brief argument about whether your sibling really needs another clay lamp, you sit down in a shaded corner to rest. You slip off one sandal, inspecting the edge of your sock. No holes. No blisters. Just a light sheen of heroic sweat. You pull out a small pouch of patched scraps, your emergency sock kit. Just in case. Because you never know when a market stone might betray you. You've been burned before. Around you, the square buzzes with life. A scribe is arguing about ink prices. A child is screaming about a honey cake. A goat is attempting to eat a basket. The usual. You close your eyes for a moment and lean back. Feet still socked, ankles still proud. You remember when you couldn't even make a matching pair. Now you're basically the Michelangelo of toe seams. When it's time to head home, the socks are slightly looser, a little dusty, but entirely intact. A market success. At home, you remove them with care and place them gently into the worn but proud section of the drawer. Not quite laundry. Not quite storage. Just basking. Your sibling glances at your sock drawer. You reorganize again. You shrug. Rotation matters. They don't argue. Because deep down, they know it does. You end the day with a quiet meal, soft sandals, and the distinct joy of having been slightly admired, at least by one guy near the onion stall. Socks, 1, cousin, 0. You wake with a plan today. Not a big one, nothing involving pyramids or high priest drama. Just a solid, achievable goal: reorganize the sock chest by material softness level. Because yesterday's market walk reminded you that not all linen is created equal, and frankly, your feet deserve better. You stretch, sit up, and immediately yank open the chest like a pharaoh checking treasure. The pairs are still tidy, still nested like sleepy little linen turtles. But something's off. You run your fingers along the rows, coarse on the left, scratchy on the right, mysterious middle ground socks in the center. The softest pair, your pride and joy, seems to be missing. You pause. Scan again. Nope. Gone. You mentally retrace your steps. You didn't wear them yesterday, right? You wore the loud ones. The striped rebels. So where? You march, well, shuffle semi-aggressively, into the next room. Your sibling is there. Eating pomegranate seeds like nothing's wrong. You didn't, you say. They don't look up. Didn't what? My socks. The soft pair. The one I told you not to touch after the sandal incident. They smirk. Oh, those. Yeah. Borrowed them for, meditation. Mainstream historical fact? Ancient Egyptians did in fact meditate. Or more specifically, they practiced various quiet spiritual disciplines, ritual purification, trance-like states, and temple chanting. But nowhere does it say they needed your socks to do it. You retrieve them from a crumpled pile behind the clay water jar. They've been stretched. Warmed by sibling feet. Slightly perfumed with onion? You exhale through your nose and return them to the needs recovery time section of the chest. Quirky tidbit? Some Egyptians believed fabric could absorb energy, both spiritual and emotional. Priests often bathed and changed garments multiple times during ceremonies to keep their linen pure. If that theory holds, your socks are currently full of petty sibling chaos. You use this theft as fuel. The reorganization begins. You clear the drawer completely, spreading every sock out like a linen crime scene. Some are soft and supple. Others scratchy, stiff, or awkwardly starched by last week's accidental salt spill. You sort them by touch, weight, and emotional trustworthiness. The drawer fills again, this time with method. Top left, cloud soft pairs. For self-care days. Middle, reliable, neutral pairs. For daily errands and unexpected temple trips. Bottom right, coarse, sturdy ones. For flood season, goat wrangling, and revenge. Historians still argue whether personal belongings were this meticulously managed among commoners. Two suggest care was taken with tools, cosmetics, and food prep, but personal clothing? Possibly less so. Then again, twos don't usually preserve everyday sock drawers. So who's to say your level of devotion wasn't completely normal? You're so deep into reorganization that you don't hear the neighbor knocking. They let themselves in, as always. Do you have something for the offering box today? They ask, already scanning your shelves. You blink. Right. Temple Day. The neighborhood takes turns sending small gifts, bread, linen scraps, flower petals, to the local shrine. It's your turn. You look around. Then down at your sock chest. You hesitate. The coarse pair. The one that never quite fit right. Worn once during last year's flood and never again. It's clean, it's usable, and it might bring someone else comfort. You pull it out, fold it carefully, and hand it over. A sock, the neighbor says. An offering, you reply solemnly. And possibly a warning. They raise an eyebrow but nod. May the gods protect your souls. You snort laugh despite yourself. You're rubbing off on the whole block. After they leave, you sit quietly with the reorganized chest. It looks calm, balanced. Your foot wardrobe, a reflection of your inner peace and recent dramatic conflict. You feel oddly powerful. Later that evening, you mend one last pair while watching the lantern light flicker on the walls. Each stitch is neat, rhythmic. A kind of linen meditation, really. Unlike your siblings' chaotic sock-stealing ritual. You finish the hem, roll the sock tight, and slot it into the newly created late-night comfort section. Yes, you made a new category. Yes, it's already full. As you settle into bed, your feet now wrapped in the softest pair not stolen in recent memory, you reflect on your day of meticulous nonsense. You've created something soothing, silly, and sacred. A sock archive worthy of scribes. The wind picks up. The village quiets. And you, snug in fabric and totally in control of your foot fate, drift to sleep wondering if maybe you should make little name tags for each pair tomorrow. You probably will. The next morning, you're greeted not by the usual crowing of a rooster, but by an unmistakable thump. Followed by another. And then a third, softer thud, like someone dropping something squishy but stubborn. You sit up, blink, and peek out your window. Ah. Sock rain. Your sibling has apparently decided it's time for a community sock wash and is using your clay roof tiles as a makeshift drying line. The socks are fluttering overhead like small, linen ghosts, and occasionally, gravity wins. Hence the thuds. You step outside in your plainest pair, today is not a show-off day, and retrieve one poor sock from the doorstep. It's yours. Of course it is. You glance up. For more. Yours. Stolen. Sun-dried. Lightly dusty. You clear your throat. Are we just throwing them now? Your sibling peers over the roof edge. The breeze helps. You stare. They toss down a sixth sock like it proves a point. Mainstream historical fact? Ancient Egyptian homes, especially among commoners, were typically flat-roofed and multi-purpose. Roofs served as sleeping quarters in the heat, storage areas, and yes, spaces for drying clothes. Many families made full use of this open, sunlit platform to manage their linens. You clamber up. The sock scene is chaotic. Pairs and singles, half dry and tangled, draped over everything from a fig branch to an old broomstick. Your favorite soft pair is flapping wildly from a pot hook. You begin the sacred recollection, lifting each sock with care. Folding. Sorting. Matching. There's a small pile of strangers, socks you don't recognize. You eye your sibling. These aren't ours. They are now, they say with zero remorse. You resist the urge to lecture about property lines and cotton consent. Instead, you focus on the rogue pile. Maybe they're from neighbors. Maybe they were blown in by the breeze. Maybe socks, like cats, just show up sometimes. Quirky tidbit? Archaeologists once uncovered a sock in an ancient Egyptian child's grave, with built-in separation for the big toe, likely to fit into a sandal. Some speculate that sock styles evolved with sandal trends. Meaning? Your current split-toe design? Historically on point. You begin matching the way only you can, with the calm precision of a pharaoh's bookkeeper. Color, seam, thread pattern, and of course, emotional energy. That one pair gives you bad vibes. Straight into the exile basket. Meanwhile, your sibling is now helpfully hanging a pot of onions from the clothesline. For balance, they say. You don't respond. You're mentally counting socks. 32 pairs. 3 singles. And 1 new one? You hold it up. It's woven tighter than yours. A darker linen, dyed perhaps with walnut or indigo. The stitching is elegant, almost calligraphic. Not yours. Not your siblings. Not from this house. Historians still argue whether neighbors regularly shared small household goods like fabric or clothing. In close-knit communities, it was common for tools, vessels, and yes, even garments, to pass from one household to another without fanfare. Whether through kindness or casual theft? That's still debated. You sniff the sock. It smells faintly of incense and fig sap. You hold it up. Did you actually take this from someone? Your sibling shrugs. It was on the ground. That's the earth giving you a present. You sigh. You decide to return it anyway. Later that afternoon, you deliver the sock to its probable home, 3 houses over, where the incense always smells fancier. The neighbor opens the door, sees the sock, and simply says, "Ah." She wanders. You blink. The sock? My cat, they clarify, reaching down. Sure enough, a tiny gray paw snakes out from behind the threshold, grabbing for your ankle. The sock was a toy. The cat was the thief. The mystery? Solved. You walk home lighter, laughing quietly to yourself. That evening, you finish resorting your collection. Everything folded, filed, and lovingly placed back in the drawer. You label a new section, Wind Travelers. Just in case more lost socks come your way. And your sibling? They now hang onions elsewhere. You think you've won this one. For now. Today is going to be different. You decide this the moment you wake up and step onto a damp floor. Not a dramatic flood or goat mishap, just the quiet betrayal of a clay jug sweating overnight and soaking your best read mat. You sigh, peel off your nighttime socks, a soft, trusted pair, and step over the puddle like a linen ninja. This morning, you have a mission: to invent something. Not something grand, like a new farming tool or a method to make sandals stop squeaking in temple halls. No, you're aiming smaller. Sock organization has reached its peak. Now it's time for sock innovation. You shuffle through your scraps and remnants, laying out a rainbow of linen fragments, dyed purples from fermented berries, deep reds from madder root, and one baffling yellow you're fairly sure came from something questionable. Today, it's time to create the multi-purpose sock. Mainstream historical fact: the ancient Egyptians were incredibly inventive with textiles. They developed pleating techniques, mastered dyeing from natural sources, and even produced transparent linen that could drape yet breathe. Textiles were both functional and symbolic, and yes, people experimented with form and function. Your vision? A sock that keeps toes warm, absorbs sweat, and has a secret pocket. You don't know what would go in the pocket. A date? A pebble? A tiny note that says, "Congratulations, your feet are special"? That's not the point. The point is you're doing something new. You stitch with focus, occasionally stabbing your finger and muttering to the gods. Your sibling wanders past. What's that? A pocket sock. For what? Secrets. They walk away muttering something about you needing more fresh air. You ignore them. You test the prototype. It's fine. The pocket bulges a bit. And walking with a small flat rock in your sock is arguably a bad idea. Still, conceptually, revolutionary. You mark the prototype with a little embroidered spiral and slide it into your new experimental section of the drawer. There's only one sock there so far, but that's how revolutions begin. Quirky tidbit? Some scholars believe certain amulets or protective charms were sewn into clothing, not just worn as necklaces. And although there's no confirmed example in surviving Egyptian socks, you can imagine someone sewing a scarab bead into their footwear and feeling invincible on their morning walk. Later, you wander outside with your oldest, coarsest pair, sacrificial, really, and do a few test steps around the garden. The socks hold. Your balance does not. You trip over a sleeping chicken and land face first in the herb patch. You sit up, pick a mint leaf from your eyebrow, and mutter, "Totally worth it." Historians still argue whether commoners had dedicated footwear for working, resting, or ritual purposes. Some evidence suggests multi-use garments were more practical. But one surviving child sock, tiny and toe-divided, challenges that theory. Why go through the trouble unless you cared about foot comfort? You return inside, smelling faintly of mint and minor ambition. A second prototype is already forming in your mind, split toe with padded soles. For long walks. Or just being fancy in your own courtyard. As the sun sets, you find yourself sketching sock ideas into the corner of an old scroll. Just loose shapes. Seams. Stitch patterns. You imagine presenting your work to a merchant or scribe one day. "And what do you call this?" they'll ask, lifting a striped, double-pocket sock. The future, you'll say, dramatically. Until then, you fold your newest creation and gently place it in the drawer next to your regular pairs. It feels right. Like planting a seed in soil you've worked for years. Your sibling peeks into the room. Still inventing? Always. They nod once, disappear, and return with something surprising, a small roll of unusually soft linen. For the next one, they say. You don't ask where it came from. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. You hold the fabric in your hands. It's smoother than anything you've stitched with before. A gift. An offering. Or perhaps, a challenge. You smile. The sock frontier has only just begun. You wake to the strange sound of quiet. Not the usual chorus of chickens, not your sibling crashing through clay bowls, not even the neighbor who insists on morning flute practice despite being tragically unskilled. Just silence. You blink at the ceiling and realize this is the perfect day. Not for errands. Not for bartering onions. For something far nobler, a sock census. Yes. A full inventory. You've been dancing around it for weeks, counting casually, folding impulsively, pretending you had a mental map of your collection. But the truth is, the drawer has grown chaotic. With prototypes, heirlooms, wind travelers, and one suspected spy sock, you've lost track of what's truly in there. You open the chest like it's the tomb of a minor pharaoh and lay out every pair on the mat. The display is magnificent. Stripes, solids, patched warriors, festival-only socks, ceremonial pairs you've never had the guts to wear. It's a bit much. Mainstream historical fact? The ancient Egyptians were obsessive about order. From hieroglyphics to granary storage, everything had its place. The word ma'at, balance, truth, and harmony, was more than spiritual, it applied to everything from justice to sock drawers. Probably. You set to work. First, matching pairs. Then, categorizing. You discover things. One pair you thought lost to a flash flood is wedged behind the sandal basket. Still damp. Still heroic. A soft, unfamiliar sock that might belong to the neighbor's cat again. It's embroidered with a fish. A tiny sock. Too small for your foot. Possibly from childhood. Possibly a doll. You keep it anyway. Sentimental socks are sacred. You sketch the layout like an architect, tallies, drawings, categories. Formal pairs, experimental zone, emotional support socks, and a newly added mystery orphans. Then you hear a knock. A courier. Temple runner. Dusty, fast-talking, waving a scroll. Your name was listed. You squint. For what? Linen artisanship, they say, handing you the scroll. Inspection next week. Sock display encouraged. You stare. Sock display? Historians still argue whether textile competitions existed outside royal or priestly circles. Records hint at weaving contests among noble women, and temples certainly valued skilled fabric work. But a civilian sock showcase? That's pure speculation, and today, your new reality. You sit down hard, scroll in hand. And then grin. Because you've been training for this your entire linen-loving life. You leap into action. Well, you stretch first. Then leap. Inventory becomes curation. You select pairs like curators pick statues, by stitch quality, color blending, toe resilience. You even polish your sandal clasps to give the socks the proper stage. Quirky tidbit? In some tombs, wooden mannequins were discovered, used to display clothing or possibly aid in dressing rituals. If you could borrow one of those right now, your sock gallery would be next level. Instead, you stuff a tunic with straw and perch a sandal on top. Close enough. You prep the top 5 pairs. The festival pair with gold thread seams, worn only once, still whispers a little. The ultra-soft spa pair, embroidered with lotus petals. A daring red set, made during your bold phase. One rain patch survivor from the flood of year 7. And, of course, the infamous prototype, double pocket, heel reinforced, toe divided, blessed by RA and very possibly haunted. You arrange them carefully. Not on the floor, no, too casual. On individual reed mats. You place labels, in your best inked hieroglyphs, beside each pair of courage. Comfy in crisis. Experimental linen interface. Your sibling walks by and pauses. Is that one labeled sock of destiny? You nod. They leave, muttering something about you becoming the linen oracle. You spend the evening polishing seams, adjusting labels, and checking for renegade lint. Your cat, now fully recovered from last week's mint incident, sits beside the display, tail swishing in approval. Before bed, you light a small oil lamp and gaze at your work. A shrine of stitches. A legacy of foot care. You whisper, "We're going to win this." To the socks. And somehow, you mean it. The week flies by. You prep like a linen-obsessed scribe on festival eve. Every morning begins with sock inspections. Every evening ends with tiny stitches reinforcing heel seams and smoothing out rebellious frays. You practice your posture in front of the mirror-polished bronze tray. You rehearse your sock lore like a priest chanting hymns to Thoth. And then, it's the day. You wake up absurdly early, before even the temple cats start yelling. The air feels sharp and cool, the kind of breeze that makes you grateful for soft fabric against your ankles. You dress carefully, neutral tunic, modest belt, sandals that don't squeak. And on your feet? The winning pair. Your masterpiece. You pack the sock display into a reed-woven carry basket, rolled, cushioned, labeled, and march down the dusty road like someone about to revolutionize linen history. Mainstream historical fact? Ancient Egyptian artisans took immense pride in their work. Whether carving, painting, brewing, or weaving, they saw craftsmanship as a sacred act. Names of skilled workers were sometimes carved into temple walls, a rare honor outside the ruling class. You arrive at the competition, a small gathering, honestly. Not quite the sock coliseum you imagined. Just a shaded courtyard near the weaver's quarter, a few mats arranged in a square, and a temple scribe holding a wax tablet with dramatic flair. You're not alone. 5 others stand with you. One has dyed her entire collection with crushed hibiscus. Another embroidered birds into every toe. One contestant arrives barefoot, carrying only one sock, and murmurs, "It's conceptual." You set up your display with care. 5 pairs, fanned in order of emotional journey. Descriptive placards. Color-coded tags. You don't smile, you radiate quiet sock authority. The judges arrive, 2 scribes, 1 linen merchant, and a priest of Anubis who seems slightly confused about why he's here. Historians still argue whether such guild-based competitions were structured or spontaneous. Some believe these informal gatherings were training grounds for young artisans, others say they were community entertainment. Either way, you're all in now. One by one, each participant explains their work. There's poetry. There's interpretive dance. One contestant compares their sock to the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, dramatically burning a thread end while whispering, "Ashes to ankle." And then it's your turn. You step forward. Bow. Clear your throat. These socks, you begin, are not just foot protection. They are stitched narratives. They carry stories of storm, of comfort, of small victories in damp kitchens. Each seam, each fold, a whisper of care. You pause for effect. The priest of Anubis nods slowly, like he's maybe starting to get it. You present your masterpiece, the double pocket, toe split, ankle-hugging marvel of textile ingenuity. A gasp. From someone. Maybe you. The judging takes time. You wait, pacing softly to avoid creasing your display. A cat wanders into the courtyard and sits next to your most experimental pair. You take that as divine approval. Finally, the lead scribe steps forward. "We award this palm-wrapped seal," he says, holding a small ink charm, "to the artisan whose socks made us feel something. Specifically, the kind of joy one feels stepping into a warm pair on a cold morning." He hands it to you. Your knees wobble. Your sibling appears, clapping with sarcastic reverence. "I always believed in you," they say. "Except all the times I didn't." You win. You walk home triumphant, the little palm seal tucked in your tunic, your sock basket light, your heart weirdly full. At home, you place the seal in your drawer, right next to the softest pair. You add a new category label, award-winning. You stare at it for a while, then add a little doodle of a foot. That night, you lie back in bed with your feet snug and your thoughts light. You've done something simple, silly, and kind of wonderful. You've taken linen scraps and turned them into comfort, into stories, into sleep. And now, as the moon spills pale light across your walls and the wind hums gently through your reed shutters, you close your eyes. Wind down begins here. You take a slow breath, the kind that fills not just your lungs, but the room around you. The clay walls soften in the flickering lamplight. The world shrinks to the comfort of a smooth mattress, the tickle of fabric at your ankles, and the gentle creak of woven mats under shifting weight. Outside, someone walks past on the road, footsteps fading. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe just a breeze masquerading as a person. You shift slightly, toes curling under the softest pair you own. The socks hold you like old memories, quiet, tender, shaped by time. Even the cat has stopped prowling, its weight settled against your leg, its breath warm and steady. You think about tomorrow, what sock to wear, what stitch to finish, but not for long. Those thoughts drift like puffs of incense, curling gently upward and away. The drawer is full. The seams are strong. The stories have been told. And tonight, nothing else matters. Not the sandals. Not the weather. Not even your siblings' questionable laundry methods. Only this moment, this quiet, and the soft certainty of linen-wrapped feet, cradled by centuries of simple, beautiful care. Good night.